Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has pointed the finger at the UN after the Syrian peace talks broke down in Geneva. He was speaking in Peru, where he's visiting as part of his South American tour. Well, Erdogan said he isn't hopeful that the talks will bring peace.
Why does the UN convene talks? Have they gathered in Geneva to postpone peace talks and stall the world? The world is expecting you to come up with a solution. You will see that the UN will postpone talks once more. I am not hopeful, because anyone, whether they're related to the issue or not, goes there. There are different talks behind closed doors. The reality is not discussed there. Those who should be there are not invited to participate, but those who should not be there are invited. The Syrian people are losing their lives as a result of attacks by the Syrian regime and its supporters. We cannot expect to have results from the peace talks before ending this misery.
Well, let's get more on this. Matthew Moore has more on the Turkish president's comments. He's in Ankara. President Erdogan obviously disappointed by what's going on in Geneva. I mean, how do you interpret what he's saying? I mean, what does he mean about the wrong people being at the talks?
Yeah, clearly President Erdogan is very frustrated about what's going on in Geneva, and particularly he believes that the United Nations has really buckled under pressure from Russia not to invite certain opposition groups, the full range of opposition groups that he'd like to see there. That includes the Turkmen. Now, the Turkmen are being bombed by the Syrian regime and the Russians north of Latakia, and he believes groups like the Turkmen should be represented at the talks. The full range of opposition should be represented at the talks. Thousands of Turkmen have, over the past few days, fled Syria into Turkey, and he believes they and other groups like them should really be in Geneva, represented in full and officially. You also heard in that soundbite he referred to closed-door talks, or backdoor talks, if you like. He may be referring to allegations that the United Nations is secretly meeting with the PYD. That's the Kurdish group in Syria, which Turkey considers to be a terrorist group and aligned with the PKK here. Now, the PYD leadership didn't have an official position at the Geneva talks, but we do know that the leadership were stationed at a hotel just down the road. And finally, on top of all of this, President Erdogan and the Turkish government are very angry about what's happening on the ground in Syria. They don't believe that the Russians and the Syrian regime can be sincerely committed to the talks while intensifying their attacks north of Latakia, north of Aleppo, when you consider that the UN resolution that brought these talks into being demanded an end to airstrikes, more humanitarian aid, and a release of political prisoners, when clearly these conditions are not being met on the ground in Syria.
Okay, Matthew Moore, thanks for that, joining us from Ankara.